Hey guys, Jason here. Welcome back to another video here on the channel. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about why I haven't switched from Windows to Linux. So I hope you all enjoy this one, and if you do, give the video a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, if you don't already know me, or if you haven't already seen some of my videos, I have done a video on Linux. I did a video where I was just messing around with Ubuntu in a VM, in a virtual machine. I've installed Debian Linux on a laptop. I've messed around with Ubuntu, messed around with Debian. Tried to mess with Kali Linux, but I couldn't ever figure out how to get it accessible, and I wouldn't even switch to that version of Linux anyways. Now, here's why I haven't switched all my desktop stuff to Linux. And of course, if we're talking about servers, Linux all the way, but we're not talking about servers right now. We're talking about desktop environments. So, one of the reasons that I haven't switched, and I've seen countless videos of people saying, "Oh yeah, you should switch to Linux," and I've heard it from like some of my tech friends. I've heard it from one of my tech friends in particular that uses Linux more than I do, but kind of still uses Windows. And he was like, "Oh yeah, well you should switch to Linux." And yes, I really should switch to Linux because I hate a lot of the Windows features that like Windows has to offer and stuff. Like I hate all the bloat that they're trying to add, and then they turn off certain features that are really good or that are really beneficial, and then they just remove them for whatever reason. Most recently, just a little technical feature. So do you remember, if you don't remember and if you haven't watched the video, I made a video where I showed you while you're setting up Windows 11, you could run this command called OOBE bypass or /bypass NRO, and that would allow you to set up Windows 11 without a Microsoft account and without the need to connect to the internet and without the need to do any of that stuff. And that's the way you should be able to set up a system anyways. You shouldn't even need to set up a system with a cloud account, for example, a Microsoft account. And that's like another reason that I would want to switch to Linux, because setting up systems, local accounts, don't need to worry about a Microsoft account at all. And now with Windows you do. And I heard that recently they've removed that command. Not particularly removed it, but now, because that command was basically a whole batch script of separate commands that you needed to run. It was just all combined in one command, and now you just have to run all the commands separately. But when I heard about it, it was in the Windows Insider Build, the dev channel. So I don't know if it's been officially rolled out yet, but it might be. But that's what I heard. Anyway, back to the topic. So, yeah. So that's a reason why I would switch to Linux, is because no need for Microsoft accounts. Linux is also free and open source. Most of the stuff in Linux, most of the software in Linux is free and open source. And you don't have to worry about the advertising built into like it is in Windows. Linux is definitely more privacy focused and it can get more privacy focused depending on what distro you choose. And well, let's talk about another reason why why it wouldn't really matter if I use Windows or Linux, I guess. I could, the only reason that I wouldn't switch is because of some of the stuff that I have to do for school. Some of the stuff that I need to do for school pretty much requires Windows. Yes, most of the work that I do is pretty much in a web browser, and I can do that just fine on Linux. But there's some things like when I write stuff like in Word, I like, their spell checking and their formatting and making sure all that's good. I've heard like LibreOffice or whatever the program, like whatever Office program that they use in a lot of the that's built into a lot of the desktop environments in Linux, for example, GNOME, and like Cinnamon and KDE and all those desktop environments. And yeah, that. So I don't really know how good that is. I don't know how better it would be to Word. Also with Outlook, I like the Outlook. Well, I don't really like the Outlook app now. When they changed it at the beginning of 2024 in Windows and tried to get everyone to switch. Well, they used to have it to where, if you didn't like the new Outlook, you could switch back to the classic Outlook, and then they just removed the feature. So now we have this new Outlook, and it lags sometimes. It sucks. I hate the new layout of the way Outlook is now. But I guess I could combat that by just using Outlook in a web browser, because that is what I do with Gmail. Because before, in Windows, back when like Windows 10 was still a thing, well, it is still a thing, but it's going to go out of support. Back before they changed it to the new Outlook, I was still using the Mail app, and I could just integrate all my accounts in there. I could put my Gmail account, I could put my school email account, and it all just worked because I could just switch from either account. And now I have to use two separate clients for my account. I still don't understand why do they have to remove the Mail app? It worked so good. I love the Mail app. Windows Mail, rest in peace, Windows Mail. I don't know why they had to do that, but that's pretty much the whole reason of why I wouldn't switch to Linux. Also, I don't really I guess audio games. I'm not really as much of an audio gamer as I used to be, or I'm not really much of an audio gamer as I used to be, or that some people are. I guess I can combat that by setting up Wine and running Windows programs through there if I wanted to switch, or just run Windows in a VM if I wanted to play audio games and just download all those games in a virtual machine, set that up in Linux. I could do all those things. So that's pretty much the only reason. That's pretty much the only reasons. Excuse me. That's pretty much the only reasons why I wouldn't switch to Linux. But now, I would switch to Linux if all those conditions were not met. Like, if I didn't have to worry about my school stuff, or editing stuff in Word, the audio games problem, that could just be fixed by either setting up a virtual machine or setting up Wine. But if it wasn't for that, I probably would switch. And here's why. A lot of the software that I use, a lot of it now is open source. The only thing that is not, that I love to still use, is my audio editor, Goldwave. But I could use Austin Audio or find another alternative. I do like Austin Audio because I use it to generate sounds and tones. If you haven't already checked out the beginnings of the Hemisync series on my second channel, you should go check that out. And noise for all those projects. But I could use that or find another alternative or do something. I'm not sure. Is Austin Audio on Linux? I'll have to look that up after I finish recording the video. But I mean, I could find other alternatives. Use something different. Also, like if I was doing, if I'm doing like most of my stuff in a web browser, I can use it for that. Because web browsing is really good on Linux. I've used it with Debian. I've used it with Ubuntu. I've watched videos. It's actually, sometimes it's a better experience than Windows. Also, I would switch because I could do more technical things in Linux. It would be seamlessly integrated. I could, run Syncthing. I can run Syncthing, the file transfer software. I mean, I can do that in Windows, but I can also more easily run that in Linux. I could set up like Docker containers and stuff. I can do more technical things on Linux. Using the terminal. I'm not afraid of using the terminal. Some people would say, oh yeah, that's the reason you don't want to switch, is because you don't want to use the terminal. Oh no, I love using the terminal. That's why I'm a tech nerd. I wouldn't be a tech nerd if I didn't love using the terminal. Because I use the Windows command prompt all the time too, and I also use PowerShell for things. But when it comes to, all that stuff and why I would switch to Linux, if it didn't have to do with school or anything else, I would switch. And some people also might argue, well, if you don't like Windows, but you also kind of don't like Linux, why don't you just switch to Mac OS? No, I don't like Mac OS. Here's why. The only reason that I would consider Mac OS is for its productivity, because I could use Logic on there, Logic Pro. I can edit my audio and stuff on there too. But other than that, I don't like the navigation of Mac OS, especially for a blind person. I don't like the layout of Mac OS. I don't like, what else do I not like? I don't like, let me just make sure it was still recording. I don't like, oh yeah, I don't remember now. I don't like the lack of customization with macOS. And you get that with Windows, and you get that even more with Linux, because you can hop in between whatever desktop environment you want, whatever distro you want. Yeah, so, yeah. Okay, so, finally, oh yeah, before I talk about, the Linux distros that I would choose, also, installing software with Linux is really easy too, just because when you're installing Linux for most of the distros, you select what package manager you want to use, and pretty much all the software that you want to install, you just go into the terminal, or you get it from whatever repository, and you do, for Debian, you do sudo apt install, or sudo apt-install, whatever app, and it'll install it for you. I think it's the same for Ubuntu. I don't remember the command now, because I actually haven't explored a lot of Linux for several months, just because I've been so busy with other things outside of YouTube and outside of this channel. So I haven't really explored it that much, so I forgot the command. And Mint, I've heard that's really easy. I haven't really explored Linux Mint, but I've heard it's pretty much just Linux with a Windows layout, kind of. Okay, so what distros would I use, or what distro would I use if I wanted to switch all my stuff to Linux? What would I do? I wouldn't really go with a more technical version of Linux to set up, like Arch or even Debian, unless the only reason I would go with Debian is if I'm installing it on older hardware, or if I'm installing on a server, which I'm not going to talk about right now. But the only reason that I would ever install Debian with a desktop environment is for older hardware. Like I installed Debian on my HP Stream laptop, which had 4 gigs of RAM, a 60 gigabyte SSD, and processor. I think it was an AMD. I always forget what it is, but it's 2 cores, 2 threads. And I decided to install Debian on that machine, and it runs, well, I wouldn't say it runs fast, but it runs faster than it did on Windows. And then, of course, I feel like even Ubuntu would run faster on that thing than it would even on Windows. I know Ubuntu even runs fast in like 8 gigs of RAM, because I've installed it on VMs and it runs fast. So I will say, I will give that to Linux. Linux, for the most part, runs faster than Windows. Well, what would I go with if I was to switch? Well, here are my options. Definitely not Gen 2. I haven't even attempted to install Gen 2, but from what I've heard of people installing it, it is not a fun experience. It's even worse than Arch, which I've heard over time Arch has gotten better. But I don't know if I would I don't know if I would use Arch. I feel like I would use Arch if I'm going to set up some kind of server thing, or maybe in just a VM if I wanted to run a VM just with Arch on top of whatever distro I'm using. Okay. I would go first. I feel like I would go with Linux Mint, just because I've heard it's simple to use, very simple. Everything comes preloaded, all the drivers and everything. It's pretty much just you get it out of the box. With other distros, you have to worry about setting all that up, especially with Arch, and other distros like that. You have to make sure all those drivers are set up. But you don't really have to worry about that with Mint. You don't really have to worry about that with Ubuntu either. With Debian, I do have to say, I love the accessibility, especially for blind people, of their installer. Their installer is very accessible. Even more accessible than I would say Ubuntu is. I haven't installed Mint, so I don't know. I'm going to probably try it in a VM, and once I do, I'll make a video about it. I should make a video on how to install Debian too. That would be fun. And, well, Linux Mint, I feel like that was the main one I would go with. I haven't used Zorin OS, but I've heard it's like Linux Mint too. Cubes OS, you would go with that if you really want to be privacy focused, but I don't recommend that, running that on a real computer. I don't recommend doing that. I've heard it's even, I don't know, I recommend running it on a VM, if you're going to run that, because basically Cubes OS is, each application is basically in set, it's basically its own, I guess, OS. So each application, it's in its own virtual machine. So you can think about it like VM inception, VMs within VMs. Virtual machine, nestation, or whatever they call that. Virtual machine, virtualization nesting. You're running, whatever you're running on your real computer. Down below that level, you have a VM running Cubes OS, and then down below that level, you have other virtual computers running applications in Cubes OS. So, yes. Also, NixOS. Maybe I've only tried this once, in a VM. Haven't really played around with it that in depth, but you know what I do love about NixOS is that you can modify the .config file, and when you modify the file, you can configure everything you want about the OS just in that one config file, and you can even send the config file to your friends. So I might, like, if I was to switch, I might either go with Linux Mint, maybe Zorin OS, or NixOS, or Ubuntu. Those would be like my 4 options. Or Debian if I was running it on an older system. But if I'm running it on a system with, let's say, more than 8 gigs of RAM, you don't really want to do Debian unless you're running a server. Even though Debian, like, in the installer, will allow you to choose desktop environments, there's just better options out there. And I wouldn't really try to go the technical route unless you really want to and play around with Arch, I guess, or some other Linux version where you need to use the terminal to install it. Which Debian you do too if you're not installing it with the graphical or accessibility installer. There is also a way to install Debian using the terminal. Also, if I were to switch, I would have to get more used to navigation with using Orca, the built-in screen reader, or if I was using a terminal Linux with just a shell, it would be SpeakUp, most likely. Well, that's what Debian uses. Oh yeah, Coconut. I haven't ever tried Coconut, but I've heard it's accessible too. Coconut Linux. So those are probably the 5 distros I would switch to. Yeah, those are my top 5. Okay, top 5. Coconut, Ubuntu, Zorin, Mint, or Zorin, Nix OS, or Mint. So those are my top 5. So yeah, what an interesting video on why I would switch to Linux and the reasons why I would or the reasons why I wouldn't want to switch to Linux. Again, like, if it wasn't for, because the audio games, I could just, no problem, I could just set up, I could just download, install VirtualBox on Linux. I think, yeah, VirtualBox or even KVM, they had that for Linux. That might be even better, but I could just set that up. It would be a little more technical thing to do on Linux, but I just set it up. run a Windows VM and then just, or use Wine to run Windows applications, set that up, even set that up, and then just and be able to play an audio game if I wanted. And then for my school stuff, yeah, that's pretty much, or for some proprietary applications like Goldwave, my audio editor that I use. But other than like that, a lot of my stuff that I like to use is open source. Most of my stuff. And, well, if it wasn't for all that, then I would switch. I would switch right now. Because I hate what Microsoft and, like, Windows is doing with Windows 11 and, all that stuff. And yes, I could deboot Windows, try to uninstall Microsoft Edge and all those other apps, which, yeah, I could do that. I've already pretty much debloated it, because what I did, for example, like, when I figured out the local account thing, and because I figured that out, like, I don't even know. My desktop, when I got that, it was already set up to set up a local account, so I just set up a local account. My laptop, I had to set up a Microsoft account, so I decided to just reinstall Windows without all the, or trying to remove all the bloat that I could, and then just setting it up with a fresh install on a fresh local account. And well, with Linux, you don't have to worry about that. You just set up a user, you set up your root and root password, and, well, you're good to go. You have whatever your local account is. No Microsoft accounts in the cloud. You don't need an internet connection to set up Linux. Don't need any of that stuff. So, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope this video convinces you, you know, if you want to switch to Linux, if you don't want to switch to Linux. I hope you found the video helpful. And, well, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.